going to get into the Q&A portion because I'm sure you have some questions for this great panel. You can pretty much span the range of all blockchain questions due to the panel that we have up right now. So feel free to walk up to this mic.
My question for you guys is is there any specific literature or videos or anything on blockchain? Because from what I see, there seems to be scattered information everywhere, and it's just hard to actually understand where to start.
Yeah, Andreas Antonopoulos is a great place to start for information. That's where I started. The way he speaks is very digestible. He has two books now, okay. Internet of Money, Volume 1 and 2, and Mastering Bitcoin is more technical, and then Mastering Ethereum is kind of technical. Okay. And then he also has a website for becoming a certified Bitcoin professional. And the study guide for that will give you everything you need to understand.
How do you feel about boot camps, considering your experience and how it took you a while to get employed?
Yeah, I'd highly recommend them. I say do your research. I probably looked at about 10 before I decided on one. Okay. And then I taught at a different one that I actually thought sort of surpassed the one that I attended, just in terms of the way the content was. So definitely do your research, talk to people who've graduated from them, figure out how long it took for them to get a job, because that also says something about the camp. There are certain camps that'll actually actively help you find a job. Some will sort of set you up, but then kind of let you go.
What has changed between, I guess, 2017 and now? What in the community has changed? Is there code of conducts in place?
But I know that a lot of people in the last year came for the money, and then some of us stayed for the tech.
Right.
And because talent is here, people like all of us on this panel are pushing for diversity and are pushing to have our people represented here. And so when there's a code of conduct needed, or we have allies, specifically, I don't know if Alex is here, but Alex is definitely somebody I would call an ally. So he's a white man, and I asked him to speak on a panel before, and he was like, if there are no women or people of color, I'm not interested. Those kinds of things are happening actively in blockchain. Even though there's a bunch of other stuff, that stuff is still happening. We still have allies that are making moves, and I think that's been a big difference between before the bull run and then after the bull run, which is now.
I mean, I think there are two ways. One is, just like I was saying earlier, the diversity in use cases in the space is not that great. Yeah. So, I would restart any initiatives in terms of, women of color, blockchain, stuff like that, because I'm very candid about these things. The new diversity in tech, and this has been true for a while, is white women. I mean, just statistically, in terms of hires. So I think if your niche is on the meetup side, then certainly focus on women of color, because they're largely ignored, even when they are some of the people that are creating some amazing use cases in the space. And then the second thing, if you were to be an entrepreneur, which I think many of us are, is certainly come to a consensus, or a Coinbase, and bring structure to the resources that they have. Because I don't think a lot of the major ecosystem players have understood that if you want something decentralized, you have to have diversified governance. You can't just say you want something decentralized and thus it becomes a thing.
My team has pushed out fully supporting by having actual lecturers go down that are experts in blockchain from Consensus to Morgan State University. We're financially funding a Blockchain 101. They are the first HBCU to have a blockchain course.
Nice.
So we started that at Consensus, and we're going to continue that effort at Morgan. Just tapping into your local universities and seeing how you could be a part is a major entrance into being an activist and making change.
So my question is more philosophical. In cases like the Verge whale, I don't know if any of you are into Verge or John McAfee. He was a huge crypto commentator. In cases where whales exist in blockchain like Ethereum, where whales can sell their entire shares and manipulate the market and make the market go down and crash, or make it go up at their will. Does that invalidate the whole decentralized system that we talk about, where we're the market is free for everybody, when really if there's a huge whale that controls the system, then that is a centralized, power structure that controls the entire market?
there is a difference in terms of plutocracy and decentralized. Decentralized is really talking about like node replication. Like where are the full nodes in that ecosystem that make up Ethereum's virtual computer? Like where are they placed? But that's also kind of semi-centralized as well, because if you look on a map in terms of all the computers running Ethereum, right, that software, it's just a collective software. If you look in the continent of Africa, there's almost nothing. If you look in huge spaces of Latin America, there's almost nothing. But I completely agree with you. There is a huge issue right now in the ecosystem, and this is why we need communities of color involved.
Robbie's right. It is a plutocracy, and I think that's just part of the growing pains of this ecosystem, right? So the major benefit that this whole movement has given us is just the idea that we can do this. I have full faith that at some point through this story, we're going to make our presence felt.
Is that really like freedom for a free market, or is that just somebody with a lot of money coming in and being able to buy the market as well and change the market at his playing field?
There is a difference in terms of having a lot of ether and being able to control the system in the way that you're talking. Having a lot of ether really doesn't have any implication to governance or freedom or people's, doing what they want to do with their own transactions, because it doesn't have any bearing to the percentage of say or power, right, in a proof of work system. The only thing that has that say is if you have the actual nodes. So it is in the case that you're talking about, like if someone has like a mining company, right, in China, they do have undue influence. The issue right now is that it's extremely expensive to have any one person like either create a consortium or collude to have 51% or just have 51% themselves. So right now I would say no, because no one person or collective of people have that much influence.
Just one more question, really short question.
Go right ahead.
Bitcoin uses up more electricity than Canada. So for the future of cryptocurrency, since everything is predicated upon Bitcoin, what do you feel like the community can do to sort of optimize the power that Bitcoin mining uses in order to give longevity to Bitcoin cryptocurrency?
The electricity argument can be skewed when people compare it to Canada, because what Bitcoin is trying to do is disintermediate so that what happened in 2008 won't happen again. And that's expensive to maintain a secure system. And that's why it costs so much electricity to do that. But there are people that are trying to build housing systems that are heated with miners. And miners like ant miners are used to mine Bitcoin on. So there are people who are trying to use miners in ways that help out the heating system. So I think that it's important to think about, as far as global warming, how much energy Bitcoin uses, and to really incentivize and get into those things. I know that they're doing it in Venezuela. They are using the miners to heat up houses. People are trying to think creatively around ways to use mining to benefit, and also introduce mining into communities that may be disenfranchised. That I'd rather have a little bit more control over my currency and spend some electricity than not and have a whole crash in 2008 again. So.
And one thing I noticed is that if you're a part of a particular project like Ethereum or IOTA, there's a lot of biased information out there, education. So what is Consensus doing, in just you all individually, to make sure that it's just not biased information?
The co-creator, Joe Lubin, has been very vocal about how, yes, he co-created the Ethereum network, but if there is one that pops up that seems a bit smoother to navigate, or you can build on it a lot quicker, whatever it may be, if it seems like it will benefit the people in a much greater way, and he's fine with us using that and promoting that, so we come from a very flexible company.
Danielle is right. We're not Ethereum maximalists. Consensus is a huge company with a lot of folks in it that came from a lot of different backgrounds. So we all have various perspectives on what makes a great ecosystem, what makes a great cryptocurrency. Right now, Ethereum is the most popular. So for that reason, you have the most development work happening on it. So it just makes it extremely easy to use Ethereum. And so, Ethereum has a lot of benefits, just flat out. If something better comes along and it's just as easy as Ethereum to use, I think we would be glad to try it out.
The future is going to have polychains. I do not believe that one blockchain will ever govern the world. And I believe that because one bank doesn't govern the world, and that's the most monopolistic vertical that you can be in.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that if they could, they would do that.
Yeah.
But there will be a lot of ones that have a lot of developers around, like Ethereum, that makes things easier. And that's kind of what's dictating the motion right now.
Other than Ethereum, which project do you see actually has like a real good use case, or a project that you're really excited about?
I love use cases. This is where I get really excited. I'm excited about Grid Plus. Like Grid Plus is like the one, I mean, because with all the natural disasters happening in the world, basically Grid Plus has made it capable on the blockchain network where I can sell you energy. So we're doing transactions of energy from the solar panels on my house to the solar panels that may still exist, even somewhat on yours, because all your neighbors got knocked out, but your place is still there, and you need energy. And now, thanks to blockchain network, we're not relying on this one source, a Con Ed or whoever, to supply us the energy. Now we can help one another.
So what do you think is the need for people who are bridging the gap between emerging technologies like blockchain and public policy to understand what the risks are with policies that will develop in the next few years, understanding how companies will navigate the landscape?
One thing that we're trying to do, at least in DC, is educate people coming, because people who make the policy don't really know much about the internet. If you watch the Mark Zuckerberg interview, they don't know much about Facebook. So it's a really big challenge in itself. Like that's already like a really big barrier for us on blockchain to be able to translate any real value. And then like some politicians are scared of the risk if they fail. And what people who want blockchain's job is to do is to get people on the ground involved in it. So recently we had a hacking the epidemic hackathon, which focused on the opioid crisis in DC, and we had people from like USPS there. We had people from Georgetown there, from Blue Cross Blue Shield there, from like people who are making these like the laws around this a part of the conversation about what we can do.
I just think it all starts with like building the curriculum into the universities. Like it gets their attention. Like I just think through education, that's one of the most powerful tools we have. We're at that stage one of really how do we present this based on the very different cultures. So, yeah, it's a really long conversation to have with several teams and pulling together this excellence that can translate.
There is always this question about node availability in different patches of the world. So you mentioned, if you look at a map and try to see, okay, where do the nodes exist? You know, North America is light, right? Europe as well, but then Africa it's all dark. And to achieve true decentralization, you almost need the nodes to be available in these places. That way you actually can have a stake in, governance and all of this. So is there anything Consensus is doing to ensure that we have distributed node availability in these places?
For 2019, we're integrating it into the way that we partner with universities. So as a part of any curriculum that you're going to create, you know, at a Morgan State, at a University of Michigan, at a Berkeley, but more importantly, you know, those equivalent schools in, you know, South Africa, in Nigeria, in Uganda, getting those there in a big way. I often say like that is the easiest social impact like initiative in the space by far. Mm-hmm. You know, it has huge implications and it's like a very straight up thing to do. You just you know, vie for money, you know, and you buy computer pieces and then you put them, you know, at the university. That's it. It was a, you know, success. You know, it'll really be interesting to see how governance changes, you know, when you have that. It's a focus in the future, but it hasn't been a focus enough up to this point.
Okay. My second question is around scaling, and that's been a big issue, and I'm sure, you know, Consensus is working on that. Are there do you have any strong opinions on whether on-chain or off-chain scaling is better? You know, where are we on on that front as far as Ethereum?
I do think the on-chain is going to get faster. I think they're working on some, some ways to basically lighten the blocks to allow just be able to fit more information per block. And right now, a lot of the scaling solutions are side chains, things like Plasma Cash, where basically you have this side chain, which is a private chain, and when you pay somebody, it happens instantaneously because it's closed off. And then at some point during the day, it sort of like migrates onto the main chain. And if anything is wrong, anything is wrong when it hits the main chain, it'll just like send it back basically. It's almost like the way it used to be at your bank where every day at 3 p.m. is like your cutoff time before you get that overdraft fee. I don't know if anybody else had that problem. So same type of situation, side chains that sort of get settled on the main chain. And I think I can very well see that being the main way that we sort of scale this thing up.
I have a philosophical question to ask you all about
We love
fundraising in terms of ICOs, and now the path that we're going to is STOs. The big problem, I can see the other side of the issue here, how STOs are designed to protect retail investors because there's a legal layer attached to it using a governmental framework that governments create that framework for you. However, this also blocks a lot. This creates barriers to entries for entrepreneurs at the same time. So I don't know how to balance this issue because I see a lot of great entrepreneurs who are of diverse backgrounds who are creating meaningful projects, but they have to raise $1 million in angel funding before even getting to an STO level. So I'm curious what your thoughts are around this. How do you balance governance at the same time empowering individuals?
I think the sort of in between is something similar to the crowdfunding model that we saw with Kickstarter, et cetera. And if the legislators allow us to do something like that, then we could legally do that. Another option is that we basically do it anyway, right? I think the true entrepreneurs will find a way, not to just kick the ball forward, but truly, like if you have a project you feel like is important enough and you're sacrificing your life and the lives of your co-founders, then you should find a way to raise, whether that be a Kickstarter, whether you raise on like some type of some currency where everything is obfuscated and encrypted, or I guess you may have to go to venture capital route.
I always tell people to bootstrap until they get that partner, right, that puts them in a position to raise. The U.S. as a country is really failing in terms of creating innovative sandboxes and policy with regards to cryptocurrency.
I agree.
Our issue is that we're obsessing over the security aspect of it, and we're not realizing that our commodities exchange as it exists today isn't inclusive enough. I mean, we're using things from 1930 securities. Come on, man. Our commodities subcommittee is going to have to recognize that new entities exist other than just securities and cotton and steel.
Do you guys know Vitalik's Trilemma question? Yeah. So Trilemma is basically, for us again, it's you have this issue between decentralization, scalability, and security. Let's play a little game here. If you had MFK, the Trilemma issue, which one would you MFK out?
F, scalability. But do you know what that means? But
yeah.
And then marry decentralization. I care about security, but I don't know. I know security is important too. That's hard.
Yeah.
I guess that's why it's a trilemma, right?
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.